For slip casting in particular, you always want to use #1 pottery plaster. It's engineered for strength and porosity and the absorption of water from casting slip. Our ratios for mixing plaster is 1 to 0.7 plaster to water. So for instance, 10 pounds of plaster goes into 7 pounds of water, and so forth. As far as figuring out volume, the method that I use, I've figured out that 7.5 pounds of plaster will make a 6x6 cube. So you can take that sense of volume and adjust it accordingly. Is that fill 6x6 area? Is that twice that? Is that half that? And then you can figure out your ratios here just by adding each column. So that being said, I would highly recommend not buying molding plaster or any other type of plaster from the hardware store. They're often too dense, and they're not going to absorb the water the way you want to, and you're not going to build up the nice thickness that you want on the cast walls. The other thing I want to mention about plaster, just like any other clay material, the particles are extremely fine and they go into your lungs, and of course they never come out and they can harden in there. So I would always suggest wearing a dust mask or a respirator, and also the material can be quite harsh on your skin, so those of you who have sensitive skin may want to wear gloves. So the next step, we need to weigh out our plaster. I have 2 buckets here and a good scale. You definitely need a pound scale. Depending on the size mold you're going to use, something up to 25 pounds would be a good thing to have on hand. I'm going to start with my water, and for this mold here, I'm going to overshoot it, and it's not a bad idea to mix a little bit more plaster than you need, just in case there's some spillage. I'm going to go ahead with 10 pounds of plaster, and that's going to be to 7 pounds of water. I'm going to go ahead and weigh out the water. I need to zero this out on the scale with the bucket on it. Or 0, and like I said, I'm going to go with 7 pounds of water. All right. So I'm going to weigh out the plaster now. Zero it out. And at this point, I'm going to put my dust mask on. I'm shooting for 10 pounds of plaster. That's good, 10 pounds. So once your plaster and water has been weighed, what you want to do is, over the course of approximately a minute, slowly sift the plaster into the water. Avoid dumping large quantities in at once, because what we're looking for is a really nice, even absorption of water to the plaster. I like to kind of spread it around so you're not dumping it all right in the same place. Like I said, if you get too many large chunks or piles in there, it's not going to absorb and you're going to end up with a chunkier mixture. So we're looking for something really fluid. Okay, so I've sifted the plaster in, and I'm just going to let it sit here, and I'm just going to watch it, and I'm watching the water absorb my island of plaster there. And once I can see it's taken up most of it, I'm going to grab the drill and plunge this thing or mix it violently. I'd say that looks pretty good. It's not absorbing plaster at a very high rate. I can still see there's a little bit going down into the water, but I'd say that's probably pretty good. So I'm gonna spend like 45 seconds to a minute really kind of violently agitating this. So I notice it's already starting to thicken up. So I'm gonna give it a stir here for another less than a minute or so. And this is just continually mixing it, but it's also now starting to release the air bubbles. They're rising to the surface. Of course, we want to keep as many air bubbles as possible out of the plaster mixture. So I guess I should add that you always want to use cold water. The warmer the water is, the faster your plaster is going to set up. And always add the plaster to the water, never add the water to the plaster. Otherwise, what you're going to get is a big chunk of dry plaster sitting on the bottom that's not going to properly mix in with the water. Okay. Now I feel like it's pretty mixed. I'm going to tap the sides a little bit. Release any more air bubbles. And now I have about a minute or so that this can sit here and start to set up a little bit. And over the course of this next minute, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to run my finger across the top every couple seconds. And at the point that I see a visible line that stays there or like a wake, then it's ready to pour. So I'm just running my finger right across the surface, and what this is doing is giving me some type of a gauge as far as how far the plaster is in its setting up process. So I don't want to pour it in whenever it's extremely fluid, because that's going to be more prone to seepage through gaps and stuff like that. I want to have something that's maybe the consistency of heavy cream or a little bit thicker than that. So the trick to pouring this in is nice and even and smooth. Try not to splash around, because that's going to create air bubbles. And don't pour it in so fast that it's going to push your model off from center. And I'm going to fill this up just like we wanted the caudal boards, approximately 1.5 to 2 inches from the widest part of your model. I'm going to go over the top about 1.5 or 2 inches. That's good. Wouldn't hurt just to tap the side of your table, get any other air bubbles out and level off the surface. That looks pretty good. It's going to take about 15 to 20 minutes, and the plaster is going to heat up, and then once it heats up and then is cooled, we can take our boards apart and try to take our model out.